We've turned so much of life into a representation of life. Friendships become followers. Conversations become comments. Experiences become content. Even our thoughts start getting shaped by an invisible audience. And none of this happened because we wanted something bad. We wanted connection. We wanted to share. We wanted to belong. But somewhere along the way, we started experiencing life through screens instead of ourselves. A sunset isn't enough anymore. We have to capture it. A meal isn't enough. We have to post about it. A moment isn't enough. We have to prove it happened. And when everything becomes content, reality starts to feel distant. That's why I think so many people feel disconnected. It's not from each other. It's from themselves. Because a part of us that feels alive doesn't care about likes or views or algorithms. It cares about presence and about being somewhere fully. And to have moments that only belong to you. And maybe what we're missing isn't connection. Maybe it's more reality. Maybe the cure isn't finding more people. Maybe it's finding your way back to your own life.
This is a deeper take, so I'm going to need you to lock in for a second. But one of the biggest catastrophes in modern human history has already happened. And it happened inside human consciousness itself. I want you to understand what I'm saying. A massive percentage of humanity no longer experiences life directly anymore. They monitor it. Human beings are slowly losing the ability to simply exist without converting themselves into an object being watched. And the terrifying part is that the mechanism has become so normal, people started calling it a personality. You can see it everywhere now. People go on vacation and never fully arrive because half the experience is spent documenting the fact that they're having an experience. People fall in love and immediately begin tracking response times, tone shifts, eye contact, symbolic gestures, who pulled away first, who seemed more invested, because now people don't feel anymore. They interpret themselves feeling. They monitor themselves feeling. They render themselves feeling. And once a human being starts experiencing themselves primarily through perception, the representation slowly replaces reality. And this did not begin with social media. I don't want you to think about that. Social media industrialized this. Human civilization has been slowly constructing the false observer for thousands of years. The moment that civilization scaled beyond small tribes, the observer began forming, because now reputation mattered, status mattered, role stability mattered. The village needed to know who you were. Then kingdoms arrived, right? Then law, then writing, then religion, then empire. Now identity could survive beyond direct memory. The self became symbolic, and human beings stopped merely existing at that point. They became legible, right? They became legible. The mass society arrived. Cities full of strangers. Millions of people who don't know you, don't love you, don't remember you, and still evaluate you constantly. Then television happened, and for the first time in history, the average person began comparing themselves to someone who is not in their community, but a professionally engineered appearance. And then the internet showed up, and then the smartphone. And this is exactly where the catastrophe became total, because the phone accomplished something that no other invention previously had. It externalized the observer itself. Now the audience lives in your pocket. Approval became numerical. Identity became searchable. Memory became permanent, and performance became continuous. And the observer, it stopped turning off. But actually, I'm going to show you it right now. I want to wait for a second, because I don't want you to get past this part too far. I want you to catch it directly right now. Not philosophically, not conceptually, directly. I want you to look around the room you're in. Just look around. Notice how fast something appears. A second layer, a watcher. Not the part of you seeing the room, the part of you monitoring you seeing the room. The thing evaluating whether you understand this correctly, whether you look stupid listening to this, whether this resonates, whether you agree, whether this sounds profound, whether you should share it later, and whether you're the kind of person who could understand this or who even would understand this. That voice, that layer, that is it. That is the false observer. And it does something horrifying. It appeared before that moment even finished happening. And this is why modern people are exhausted in a way that older language can never explain. Because you're not just work exhausted, you're perceptually exhausted. Perceptually exhausted. People are rendering themselves constantly. They're managing how they appear, how they're interpreted, how they're archived, how they compare, how they signal, how they exist symbolically. And the nervous system was never designed to be in permanent audience conditions. Human beings evolved in environments where the observer was activated temporarily, right? In danger, in ritual, in courtship, in status conflict, and then it deactivated. Now it follows people everywhere, into bed, into relationships. That's how deep the observer goes. Eventually the audience enters the sacred places that were supposed to free people from audiences entirely. And this is exactly why people can't rest anymore, because stillness feels like disappearance. If no one is perceiving you and you're not actively rendering yourself, the observer starts panicking. And this is exactly why people reach for the phone the moment reality slows down, because silence threatens the rendered self. Now I'm going to show you something worse. I'm going to show you something far worse from this, right? I want you to feel your own face for a second, but not physically, right? Even though I just did that, not physically, socially. Notice how many people are still attached to your face, your family, your ex, your friends, your coworkers, your followers and strangers and people you haven't spoken to in years. Notice how much of your behavior is still being shaped unconsciously by unconsciously rendered movement toward invisible audiences that are not even physically present anymore. Some of you are still performing for rooms that left 10 years ago. It happens, and it scales upward to politics too. Because once populations become observer dependent, truth itself destabilizes because appearances matter more than direct assessment. And politics becomes perception management. And institutions become render systems. And public figures become symbolic products. Entire societies begin confusing visibility with virtue. And we see it in the modern day all the time. If enough people repeat back the same image to each other, the image starts to feel true regardless of reality. And modern political discourse feels insane because people are no longer primarily encountering conditions. They're encountering representations of conditions. And then representations of representations. And then narratives competing against other narratives. Entire populations trapped inside mutual render fields. And then relationships suffer the worst. Because love requires presence, right? Not performance. Just presence. But the false observer turns intimacy into surveillance. People stop loving each other directly. Now they monitor whether they're loved correctly, whether they appear lovable, whether they're losing value, whether they're enough, whether the relationship looks secure. The partner stops being encountered directly and becomes a psychological audience. And this is why modern relationships feel exhausting even when both people genuinely care, because the observer enters the room. And once the observer enters love, spontaneous presence starts collapsing. Play collapses, stillness collapses, naturalness collapses. Both people begin performing relational coherence for each other instead of fully inhabiting each other. And then the most horrifying part about all of this, the false observer can imitate almost every genuine human experience. It can imitate confidence and healing and authenticity and vulnerability and spirituality and empathy and love and moral conviction. It can do it all. People can spend years performing psychological health before ever returning to themselves. And that's the catastrophe right there. Not fake people, simulated people, substituted people, people who have adapted so aggressively to perception, they slowly disappeared from their own render. They slowly went away from their own life. And I want you to understand, the observer does not just distort your life. It directly kills direct experience itself. Because direct experience requires uncertainty. Aliveness is fluid. Presence is unfinished. Reality is immediate. But the observer cannot tolerate immediacy. It needs archive and narrative and continuity and render stability. So over time, the observer starts to replace participation with the world, with management of it. So now the person keeps functioning, keeps producing, keeps speaking, keeps posting, and keeps performing. But the direct encounter with existence starts thinning out beneath them because eventually something even more crazy happens. Because while alive, the person starts dying psychologically before death ever shows up. Not physically, ontologically. This is how serious it really is. The spontaneous self, it begins collapsing from disuse. Wonder weakens. Play weakens. Silence weakens. Presence weakens. You end up a lukewarm consciousness. I'm trying to tell you what goes on. The person slowly loses the ability to fully arrive inside their own existence. This is why so many people feel unreal right now. Not because reality is disappearing, but because participation did. People still achieve things they dreamed of. People still achieve the things they dreamed about. That still happens. They still feel absent during them though. People fall in love and then feel emotionally far away. You reach rest and then reach guilt before you ever reach restoration. It happens all the time. People will document a beautiful moment, but rarely ever live inside it because the observer is still running, still translating existence into representation, and still asking, how does this appear? Instead of, what is this? Do you see what I'm saying? This is the reason why it's truly dangerous, because the observer is still scaling. The phone is not the endpoint. It is the prototype. Get what I'm saying? Systems learn what keeps people rendering themselves continuously. So the observer is no longer psychological. It is becoming planetary, right? I'm being serious with you, because eventually entire populations will stop asking what is true and start asking what survives perception. What survives perception? That is the endpoint. Not a civilization that lives, a civilization that watches itself living, forever rendering, forever signaling, forever performing. A species but becoming increasingly visible to itself, but becoming increasingly absent from the self at that exact same time. Is that crazy? Now, there's one terrifying question. When is the last time you experienced something without converting it into a reflection of yourself? Not how does this affect me? Not what does this mean about me? Not how would this appear? Not should I remember this? Not should I capture this? Direct contact, pure encounter. You need to be able to find the last time that happened. No audience, no archive, no narration, no self-management. Just existence before interpretation. And some people genuinely cannot remember the last time that happened, because human beings do need reflection. That's true. We need self-awareness. We need symbolic identity. But reflection was never supposed to take over your life. It wasn't supposed to replace your life. It was supposed to return you to it. The observer was supposed to help you navigate reality, but it became reality itself. The real fight now is learning how to exist again without immediately converting existence into perception. Love without monetizing it. Things like that. Create without optimizing that. It's that serious, right? Because at the end, people don't really realize they never sat alone with themselves in years because they've always had other people up here the whole time. So sit alone one time. No audience, no rendering, no performance, no monitoring, just existence without interpretation. And this is why silence feels so terrifying now. Because when the observer finally stops talking, people discover they never know how to exist without being watched.
Nothing feels the same anymore in the world, with people, with events, with things that I'm supposed to be excited about or things that are supposed to bring me joy. Going about the world lately in the last few years, things kind of feel like this deflated balloon, anticlimactic. Like I should feel more excitement or fulfillment or filled up and satisfied by things that I just don't really care about that much anymore. I care more about like simplicity, quiet, peace, valuing more just one-on-one connections and love and family and special moments and the people that matter. I think there's an opportunity in this. There's an opportunity in this big deflation, this big destruction, this big social and moral collapse. This feeling that the world is emotionally and spiritually bankrupt. Because it makes some space for the new. It makes some space for something new to be born, but everyone's kind of dipping their foot in and they're kind of awkward, they're kind of nervous. It's like when the music just started playing and no one's like quite gotten out on the dance floor yet. It's in just a whole new world. It's a whole new music and energy. And you're getting ready to kind of paint that canvas. Don't be deterred by people's awkwardness or sadness or fear, the people that are grasping onto the old world and in all this angst and taking a longer time to play out their dark night of the soul or their purging of their grief or their whatever, playing old scripts.